entertaining, and appealing enough to draw large crowds to Foxville is a sign that Fox Hillians found ways to economically empower themselves many, many years ago. By the were indeed economic empowered communities. These areas should have thrived after majority rule. Me, that they where did we lose our way? Just about every yard in Foxville had fruits and vegetables of all types. Mangoes, grapefruit, pigeon peas, oranges. When I went to my first touristy game, I, like most people in Foxville, just had to walk out of the door to pick an orange, a grapefruit, or anything from the tree. Now the buzzword is backyard farming. I am delighted that we are going back to our roots, going back to the inherent economic value in both commercial and subsistence farming. How did we lose it? Mr. Speaker, whilst we may not have the land mass in Foxville to be commercially competitive on a large scale, this bill certainly offers the opportunity to the people in Foxville to be competitive on a boutique and or specialty scale. On Wednesday, 1st of August at 7 p.m., as part of the Foxville festivities, Mr. Speaker, I will be hosting an evening of art, culture, and heritage at the Foxville Community Center. I invite all to come. I invite New Providence to join us and experience some of what Foxville has to offer. Mr. Speaker, in addition to local art, craft, dramatic and dance performances, we will be serving, selling beverages, including Ganep Aid, like lemonade, and gooseberry aid, and tamarind juice, and a variety of other local offerings. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we will not be able to offer the pineapple wine. One of the residents of Foxville grew pineapples on the flat roof of her house because she didn't have sufficient land space. In addition to having it as fruit, she would experiment with making pineapple wine. So she bottled the pineapple wine for fermentation. Everything was going well until suddenly the bottle started exploding. Because it was the first experimentation, she did not leave sufficient space for the wine to expand. And having no additional space to expand, the bottles of pineapple wine started exploding. So she telephoned the police and asked them to send the bomb squad. Mr. Speaker, NASA finest arrived on the scene, and the bomb squad detonated the remaining bottles of fermenting pineapple wine. She will try again because our people are resilient and persistent. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, people in Foxville, are seeking ways to economically empower themselves by using things that occur naturally in the community that we live in. Mr. Speaker, this bill will provide the possibility and the opportunity for ordinary people to turn the gooseberry aid, the Ganep aid, and pineapple wine into commercial ventures that can sustain them and their families. Mr. Speaker, I know that I am dwelling on the naturally occurring produce of the area, but it is right now producing dividends for some of the ordinary residents of Foxville. Earlier this year, Mr. Speaker, the executive chairman of BAIC, the member for Golden Gate, came to me with an economic proposal. He said that BAIC would purchase all the salmon that Foxville could supply. We put this offer out to the young and to the not-so-young people of Foxville. And as a result, onion bags full of camels were sold to BAIC. Mrs. Dorothy Knowles, who has the fruit and vegetable stand on Foxville Road, is one of the suppliers to BAIC. She proudly spoke about her first check. She supplies Billy, Mammy, and Jeanette. Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of economic empowerment that's happening right now. One can only imagine how much more powerful this can become with the passage of the Economic Empowerment Zone Bill. Mr. Speaker, let's take this a step further. A relationship such as this with BAIC will go even further to benefit the most vulnerable residents and residents that are on the do not employ or the hard to employ list. And speaking, Mr. Speaker, about young men and women who have minor records in the criminal court and find it difficult to find gainful employment in traditional places. With organizations like BAIC, these young people in effect can become their own boss. As an aside, Mr. Speaker, we must revisit the issue of expunging the records of young people who have minor offenses and where these records stand in the way of gainful employment. This can be a barrier to realizing a fully successful economic empowerment community. Mr. Speaker, I went through all of that to make the point that Foxville has many fruits that are not easily found elsewhere on the island. These fruits, like the tomatoes that were grown for export so many years ago, is just one option among many that offers a route back to economic empowerment with an abundance of service, small manufacturing, and touristic components. Foxville has an empowered community. Foxville was an empowered community, having had the Paramount Burial Society, St. Anne's Friendly Society, Asu Drawers, and Josiah the JP was indeed a real man, a Foxville man, the grandfather to Senator the Honorable Johnny Ann Dorset. It was he who donated the property for the Foxville Parade and the Lodge Hall. Leon Walton, L.W. Young, was a black Foxvillian and a businessman who served in the House of Assembly from 1912 to 1942 as the representative for the Eastern District. Many years ago, the monks at St. Augustine's Monastery made candles, which they sold to local restaurants, nightclubs, and hotels. They made ice cream using the fruits from their orchards. I remember the rum raisin, strawberry, chocolate, vanilla, and mint ice cream because the monks gave them to us as summer treats. All of the above confirms that Foxville was well on the way to becoming a fully fledged, economically empowered community. But some wrong turns had a negative impact on Foxville and other heritage communities. Whilst many of the people excel, and thrive. Many have struggled and have lost hope. Community-based businesses and services gave way to multinationals and big businesses, big local businesses. I asked the question several times, what happened? Mr. Speaker, whatever happened to derail the economic and social progress of heritage community has happened. Fortunately, it can be fixed. Mr. Speaker, as legislators in this honorable place, we have a collective responsibility and an awesome opportunity to come together to do what is right and beneficial for our country. I think we can find common ground here. Mr. Speaker, this legislation, which allows Foxhillians to operate tax-free businesses with the Economic Empowerment Zone, the Lionel Davis Service Lot Subdivision, proper zoning within the Economic Empowerment Zone, the hopeful redevelopment of Bernard Road Corridor, a commitment to jealously maintain the culture and the flavor of the community and protect its heritage sites for touristic possibilities will help to put Fox Hill back on the road to full economic empowerment. Mr. Speaker, so to tie it all together, all of the components of economic empowerment that I spoke about harken back to land ownership. Fox Hill has some issues with land ownership, and since we will not be the first out of the blocks for the Economic Empowerment Zone, we can fix these things in preparation for our time. The Land Adjudication Act will make it possible for land to be available for expanded economic possibilities. And Mr. Speaker, as we tie it all together, all of these components of economic components that are already resident in Fox Hill and that harken back to land ownership will pave the way. Mr. Speaker, the bill provides 3 ways for residents to access the program. One of them is clear title, and the other 2 require the approval of the beneficial owners. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the Land Adjudication Act will go hand in hand with the Economic Empowered Zones, Bill 2018. Together, they will make it possible for land to be available for expanded economic possibilities for those who actually live in Fox Hill. The member for Killarney has often spoken about sorting out the so-called generation property and commonage properties so that they can become economically valuable to the families that quote-unquote own them. I fully support him in his efforts to achieve this. Mr. Speaker, there are a large percentage of people in Fox Hill who are desirous of benefiting from the tax incentives being offered by this bill, but they will not be able to fully do so due to the following. 1, many Fox Hill residents do not possess good and marketable title for the property that they are residing on and are desirous of renovating or developing. Good and marketable title, in accordance with the Conveyancing Law and Property Act, is described as 1, a sound grant, conveyance by purchase, that is 30 years old or older, and 3, certificate of title. Mr. Speaker, there are large parcels of land within Fox Hill constituency that are vacant but cannot be developed due to lack of good and marketable title. Many of us would have encountered this as we attempted to assist constituents with roofing repairs. In particular, Mr. Speaker, there are tracts of land in Fox Hill where people do not have access roads to the land, so they are doubtful of being able to take advantage of this landmark opportunity. Mr. Speaker, in 1840, the House of Assembly of the Bahamas granted the Honorable Robert Sandilands money to construct Fox Hill Road, extending from the Eastern Road in the north to a creek in the south, passing through his large tract of land in order to facilitate the development of Sandilands allotment plots. These were plots of land which were purchased by freed African slaves. In some instances, this kind of government intervention will have to be a consideration for the economic empowered zone to become fully beneficial to Fox Hillians. Mr. Speaker, another vexing obstacle for Fox Hill residents that Foxville residents will face is that many of them do not possess the financial resource to file petitions in the Supreme Court under the Quieting Titles Act 1959 in order to obtain good and marketable titles for their properties. I will fully support any government plan to proceed quickly with the Land Adjudication Act to help relieve the burden of some of these issues connected to land throughout the Bahamas and particularly in Foxville. And whilst I have national attention, Mr. Speaker, might I suggest that the students at the Eugene DePuch Law School consider rendering some assistance by providing Foxville residents with legal aid pro bono for solving their land issues. Mr. Speaker, I am proud that this government is continuing to fulfill its manifesto promises to the Bahamian people by introducing legislation that will provide opportunities for economic freedom and empowerment for ordinary Bahamians. And in particular, this bill provides Foxville with the opportunity to return to its roots of being a fully
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to stand in this honorable House to represent the people of Tall Pines. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to stand in this honorable House, more importantly, to represent the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I'm always reminded of our obligation as members of Parliament. We stand here and the first words come out of our mouth is we're proud to represent North Andros and the Berry Islands, East Grand Bahama, Kalani, Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. But the important point that I think each member of this honorable House has to remember is they not only represent their constituency, which is very important, but each and every one of us have an obligation to represent the fine people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so when I stand here this morning, Mr. Speaker, and I speak on this very, very timely bill, this very important bill, one may question, why is Tall Pines standing to support a bill when Tall Pines was not mentioned in that awesome list that the Prime Minister mentioned? Foxville and being in Grandstown, and he didn't call me his son, Mr. Speaker, but that's fine. I know I'm one of his sons. For Tall Pines, we understand our obligation, Mr. Speaker, to the greater good of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for being in Grandstown, for Angliston, and for all of the, and for Nassau Village, Mr. Speaker. You got to support Nassau Village, Mr. Speaker, because we understand when Nassau Village, when Beans and Grandstown, when Angliston, when these communities in our inner city benefit, Tall Pines benefit. And so, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, I want to start off by saying thank you, Member for Kalani. Thank you to your wonderful team that joined us yesterday, who have championed this cause, who caused this promise to the Bahamian people to become a reality. And Mr. Speaker, I have a style of presenting my presentations in this House, and I want to continue in that style. I think, Mr. Speaker, all of us, we must always go back to the base. Mr. Speaker, I think our base is right here. When we went to the Bahamian people, and we told the Bahamian people that if you elect us, we're going to do certain things. If you elect us, we're not going to only look after the residents of Kalani. We're not only going to look after the residents of St. Anne's, We're not only going to look after the residents of Bamboo Town and Tall Pines, but we're going to speak specifically, obviously Tall Pines. But we're going to look at a group of people that a certain party, the PLP, always sells, always give this wrong, dire perception of the F&M not being a part of these communities. And you know what we did, Mr. Speaker? We made it very clear. We made it very blunt. We put it on paper. We presented to them. And I invite every Bahamian to go back to what we promised you. We promised you, Mr. Speaker, that we will transform the over-the-hill community. I said, Mr. Speaker, and so while the PLP could stand and sit in this house today and say that we're politicizing this matter, it isn't a matter of politicizing, Mr. Speaker. It's a basic issue of deliverance. The F&M has always been about deliverance. So I invite every Bahamian, every person who lives in Tall Pines, any person, any Bahamian who lives in any constituency, go back to what we promised you. We promised you that we will transform the over-the-hill community. And Mr. Speaker, we were very precise. We say clearly, Mr. Speaker, affect legislation which would allow duty-free concessions on all construction material and building supplies used in the construction of business premises and new and or refurbished owner-occupied homes. Speaker, I don't know how simple to put it. Right here, black and white. And it goes on to speak to some of the very same issues or very same clauses, very same objectives that this particular bill presents to the Bahamian people. So say, Mr. Speaker, what you want to say. We ask you to put your faith in us, and you did, in a huge, huge way. That they're still jealous of. There's 4 of them, Mr. Speaker. There's like 28, 29 of us. 35 of us. So the mandate was a great mandate. But Mr. Speaker, I said we go back here, but I go beyond that because we not only got the mandate, we went and when we were sworn in, Mr. Speaker, we said to the Bahamian people, we haven't forgotten. And we reminded the Bahamian people again of that commitment we gave them, that we're not going to forget our brothers and sisters in the inner city, that we're going to stick to our promises and our obligation to make your lives better. What he says he would do, he would fight every day to make sure it's done. Speaker, you know, one of the other things I always walk around with, because to bring to the Bahamian people, but more specifically the constituents of Tall Pines, our plan for addressing the landfill issue. And I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, based on the information I've gotten, that a decision has been made. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say to the people of Tall Pines, we've delivered. Speaker, in this, Mr. Speaker, I talked about crime and my obligation with working with the government to make sure crime watch initiatives were in place. That we put in place policies to fight crime, to make sure every Tall Pines resident, every Bahamian can be safe in their homes, Mr. Speaker. It's right here. And I'm proud, Mr. Speaker, the leadership of Kalani, to say that, yes, we have started our neighborhood watch initiative. We started to put real teeth to our crime watch efforts in the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, I can say to the Bahamian people in the Tall Pines, we have delivered, Mr. Speaker. homework center and our computer lab functioning. And we intend to build on it when school opens again, Speaker. And it goes on. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that when we have these particular pieces of documents that speak to our obligation to the Bahamian people, our promises, don't come in this house and try down our positions, to try down our policies when we have already put the Bahamian people, and now we're here to basically say to you, thank you very much for putting your faith in us. We are here, Mr. Speaker, to say, being in Grandstown, Angliston, Fox Hill, and all of the over-the-hill communities, thank you very much for putting your faith in us, and now today we are here to deliver for you. Mr. Speaker, you know, I have a grandmother, her name is Elsaida Humes, and she's deceased now. So I want to dedicate this particular presentation to her because, Speaker, she lived in the over-the-hill community. I'm not going to stand here, Mr. Speaker, and say that I'm one of those persons who grew up poor. I definitely didn't grow up rich. But I remember walking from St. Francis and Joseph School when it was on top of the hill, West Street, walking down the hill on West Street to go to my Grammy's house on Palm Avenue, Wolf Road. I remember walking and playing on the street on Palm Avenue, Wolf Road. Stephen did a primary school. Heart of the inner city. I know the inner city, Mr. Speaker. My wife and so many people tell me that I kind of live still in the inner city, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, I understand that community. My uncles, Bishop John and Solomon Humes, and my aunt Catherine Humes Dames, and my dad, they all grew up on Wolf Road. I know the community, and I know, Mr. Speaker, the benefits that would be had by this particular piece of legislation. And so, Mr. Speaker, when you look at our obligation touching lives, when you look at our obligation of addressing the issues of hurting persons in the Bahamas who are truly hurting, when we look at our obligation to build and develop our inner cities, the reality is this, Mr. Speaker. We could hide from it, we could duck and dodge it, but it's a simple fact. The PLP has failed the people, the Bahamians of the inner city. I'm going to repeat that. And I'm not, this is my opinion, but I think it's the opinion of most Bahamians if they really sit down and think about it. The PLP, whom those hardworking Bahamians have put their trust in for so many years, including Angliston, because I wish he was here, Mr. Speaker, they failed the residents of the inner city. Mr. Speaker, I'll always remember when we had the by-elections in Abaco, North Abaco. We had a by-election in Abaco. I remember, I was one of them FNMs, Mr. Speaker. I come from the belly of the FNMs. And I remember my first time in Abaco, big old man, never been in Abaco before. But I went with the FNM to try and deliver that seat in Abaco. I was one of the lawyers, Mr. Speaker. And I'll always remember that because I remember the defeat we had there. And I was one of the lawyers there. And I remember sitting on that box from Cooperstown after getting that beat, Mr. Speaker. Still having to sit on that box from Cooperstown all the way to the airport in Marsh Harbor, jump on the plane, protect this box that we knew we already got a bad beating in. I don't know why I was protecting the box, but I had to protect the box. But the only thing I remember is this. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas was the former Prime Minister of the Bahamas was the Member of Parliament for North Abaco. And I remember driving on Marsh Harbor Road, and you could tell, like especially when you're in a plane, Mr. Speaker, when you're climbing and you have all that turbulence, and then when you get to cruising speed, everything just cruises. I remember driving, and I remember when I touched down in Cooperstown, the road felt better. The road felt better, Mr. Speaker. I never saw any family island with sidewalks. The community was clean, taken care of. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas took care of his constituency. Now, Mr. Speaker, it cost me as a young, I was in the house then, I wanted to be here. I said, you know what? Let me compare Hubert Ingram's constituency and his representation. And then I remembered the then Prime Minister. And I was, what constituency he represented? Centerville? And I remember the fact that Centerville, represented by the Prime Minister, for umpteens, as we say in the Bahamas, umpteens of years, numbers can't count. It took those people, what, 40 years to make the change. Outside toilets. The road conditions were nothing like driving from Cooperstown. In fact, in some places it went worse. Then I looked at places like Angliston, represented by PLPs for umpteen years. You look at places like Bain and Grandstown, represented by PLPs for umpteen years. And the list goes on. And I say to myself, I pray God that these Bahamian hard-working people would come to the realization that if they want change, if they want to experience the real Bahamian dream, if they want to experience the real Bahamian dream, that they would actually walk with Doc. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, because I remember us during the campaign in a park in Bain and Grandstown on Nassau Street. I remember it vividly because we were there and it wasn't Travis, it wasn't the member for Bain Town at the time. It was another candidate at the time. And the Prime Minister went on that stage and he made his promises. I remember it because the former MP for Torrey Pines came there and tried to do this thing, as I told the Bahamian people that don't get fooled by that, you know? Came there to make looking as if he was a part of our team to soften the blow. But thank God the Bahamian people didn't get fooled by that. So that, you know, that kind of stick that in my mind. But I remember, Mr. Speaker, I remember it. Because I wanted a hug too that day because he got some hugs and I didn't get no hug. Right? Mr. Speaker, I want to remind certain people, I'm still willing to accept my hug. But Mr. Speaker, the important point I want to make here is this. That at that rally, when the leader said he wanted the people of that area to rock with Doc, walking with Doc came with a commitment to them. And that commitment was that the promises that he made in this manifesto would be delivered on. And so, Mr. Speaker, when you look at this particular bill, this bill speaks to concessions, to duty-free concessions and other concessions with taxes for persons in businesses and persons in occupied residents in those zones. And so, what does this mean for those Bahamians? You know, a big term was used yesterday, this gentrification. 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 Speaker, I'm a lawyer, but I did study sociology. And I remember this gentrification word when I was in my class, and I was like, you know what, you know, it's interesting that we're raising this. And I wondered, for a while I thought, why is the PLP actually advancing this argument on gentrification? Is it that they don't want the inner city, and I stand to be corrected, is it that they do not want the inner city to be cleaned up? Is it that they don't want the inner city residents to have the concessions to be able to fix their businesses, to be able to fix up their homes, to be able to get the parks in order that the Prime Minister presented to the Bahamian people yesterday? Because I understand gentrification in its simplistic sense, meaning basically that inner cities will be taken over by individuals who might buy up the properties. After they're cleaned up, the value goes up. And those persons who could afford to live in the homes now would be pushed out. But let's, Mr. Speaker, look at the bigger picture. The reality is that people who live in Torrey Pines and in Bamboo Town, and many of us who live in Kalani, Our roots was in Bain and Grandstown and all these other inner cities. The fact that we don't live in those communities anymore doesn't take away the fact that we want to see those communities get better. It doesn't take away the fact, the matter, that I want to still be able to go to my grandmother's house on Wolf Road, hang with my South Side boys under the tree, and know that the community is clean. Know that they have these opportunities to benefit from this bill, to be able to get tax-free exemptions, to clean up and fix their homes. A lot of people in the inner city do not want to move out of the inner city, Mr. Speaker. A lot of those homes in the inner city are owned by the people who live in those homes. A lot of those businesses in the inner city, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the talk about, oh, the Chinese and other people who own a lot of the businesses, the reality is that most of those businesses and most of those homes are owned by raw Bahamians. And Mr. Speaker, even if it wasn't owned by Bahamians, those businesses, and if you look at the bill, Mr. Speaker, it says that you're not going to benefit from any concessions if your taxes aren't up to date. You're not going to benefit if your house isn't in order in terms of your obligation to the Bahamian government. And so if you're a foreigner, get your house in order and you benefit. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't make sure put in place some regulations to make sure it is not exploited. And I would suspect, Mr. Speaker, that the government in its regulations, and when they look at this thing and the fine-tuning it, the regulations, that they would be careful about those concerns, because they are legitimate concerns. But the reality is that I want my Grammy house on Wolf Road. She still owns it. I want my dad and my cousins and my uncle, my family who want to still be able to go there in their homestead and to be able to be in a nice, clean area, in a nice house. The businesses in those areas to be able to benefit from what this bill presents. Because we believe, Mr. Speaker, we believe in our inner city development program. You know, the member for, I think it was South Andrews, and I stand to be corrected, or Engliston said, do the people feel what we're selling? I think that was the term they used. Are the people feeling what we're selling? Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. I think the Bahamian people feel what we're selling. I think they feel what we're selling because they understand that for so many years, their communities are almost being overlooked by the party that says that they look out for them. And that's why they put their trust in us. And so while South Andrews was concerned about the style of the Prime Minister's speech and his telling the story, telling the real story of where we came from, I tell him, don't get sidetracked by the style of the Prime Minister's speech. Focus on the content of the Prime Minister's speech. And when he talked about what this bill will do to help Bahamians in the inner city, don't get mad because we're reminding the Bahamian people where they are and where we want to take them. Don't get mad because we're reminding the Bahamian people for what has gone wrong in the past, and we acknowledge that wrong and we want to fix it. Don't get wrong, or don't get mad because the Prime Minister who is leading this charge feels an obligation to say to the Bahamian people in those areas that I'm going to take on this challenge. I'm going to be like the former Prime Minister who looked after his constituency. And the Prime Minister's constituency, like all of ours, is not only Kalani. His constituency is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. His constituency is every Bahamian. And so while he talked about growing up in Bain and Grandstown, his obligation, Mr. Speaker, is to everyone. And I say to him, you are empowering Bahamians when we pass this bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill talks about, in its various clauses, for example, what needs to be done in order to qualify. I talked about, and I think the member for Fox Hill mentioned it, having legal title to the property, or you being responsible for the upkeeping of the property with the authorization from the owners. Speaker, it speaks to speak about in clause 8 about the certificate of trade, Mr. Speaker. In clause 9 about the application being made in good standing, and I talked about that, where you have to be up to date with your taxes, your NIB, etc. The Speaker, the bill talks about penalties, and I think it was raised yesterday as to why individuals versus companies are being penalized if the penalty is different. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that companies are companies. And any bill, and I've seen many of them, and they speak to properties owned by companies. There are ways in which you could penalize companies. And if it gets to the point where, as we say in law, that the government or the prosecution has to pierce the corporate veil, which simply means going behind the company. If there's a fraud, if there's some other means by which you have to go behind the company, the shield of the company, and go to the individuals, the beneficial owners of the company, then if that has to be done, Mr. Speaker, that will have to be done. But the government has to look at the reality. The reality is that individuals own properties, and the reality is that companies own properties. And so the bill has to speak to penalizing those particular bodies, whether you're an individual or whether you're a company. And so we need not try to detract this bill by getting into a frivolous argument in that regard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we talked about whether or not the appeal process. Mr. Speaker, I think South Andrews mentioned the fact that the commercial enterprise bill doesn't have any, well, he talked about the fact that the enterprise bill said that if the approval wasn't done, then it's automatically approved, and this bill doesn't speak to that kind of empowerment. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that there is provisions in this bill, in section 6, Mr. Speaker, that talks about what one could do if your application is not approved. And it speaks that if it isn't approved by the Minister of Finance, that you could appeal, Mr. Speaker, to the minister responsible for the bill. And in this case, I would suspect it doesn't say it, but it's clear that the Prime Minister's office is responsible for this bill. And I say this respectfully, if East Grand Bahama, who is the Minister of Finance, gives you a reason in writing that why he did not approve your bill. So you go, respectfully, East Grand Bahama, you go to the bigger boss. Go to Kalani, who is the Prime Minister. He's responsible for the bill. And if the Prime Minister, if you're not happy with what the reasons why the Prime Minister isn't approving your bill or giving authorization to approve your application, then the act says then you go therefore to the Governor General. And South Andrews question, how could you appeal to the Governor General? And I thought about that. And maybe, Mr. Speaker, I think that what the bill is saying is that you go then to the courts. And there is a legitimate argument as to the wording of the bill. I see Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador saying didn't say that. But maybe, Mr. Speaker, that's the direction we should go into. Making it simpler for the person who's reading this, especially for people like me and Cat Island who, lawyers sometimes, as the leader always says, be careful of these lawyers. But just say that. Well, the fact is that there is an appeal process in place. There is an appeal process, whether it's done, they say the Governor General, the courts, so judicial review, Mr. Speaker, judicial review, where if there's any issues and government policies and so forth, that you could actually take it to the court and have them address it. And so, Mr. Speaker, this bill presents that avenue for the average Bahamian to be able to get its day in court, as we say in the Bahamas. And so we look out for the Bahamian people to make sure that we are going to put our reasoning in writing, and so that when you walk away, you would know that justice has been done to you. Mr. Speaker, you know, as a down-home Bahamian, as North South Andrews likes to say, I'm always baffled sitting from where I sit, and I hear the opposition debate and they challenge these very timely bills that the government now presents. And they come with all of these curveballs, Mr. Speaker, as it was evident yesterday, that they tried to derail this bill by going in all kinds of different directions. This bill is about the inner city, which we would think, the Bahamian people would think, the PLP of all the people who claim to be the champions of the over the hill would sit small and be happy that, thank God, the F&M is delivering for the inner city. Speaker, they talk about sustainable development, etc. But sustainable development is about empowering the inner city. It's about making sure that the parks that the Prime Minister speaks about, these parks are developed to the standard that they should be. It's about, Mr. Speaker, making sure that persons in every community live in a safe community. And that's why the F&M government presented the Crime Watch initiatives. Speaker, it's about making sure that there is access to affordable living and education, Mr. Speaker. It's about environment, Mr. Speaker. It's about protecting the environment. How best you protect the environment, Mr. Speaker, than making sure that, making sure that Bahamians get rid of these outside toilets. How best you protect your environment? How best you protect your environment, Mr. Speaker? By making sure that there's running waters in these communities, Mr. Speaker. How best you protect your environment, Mr. Speaker? By making sure that there are parks and making sure there's green spaces. How best, Mr. Speaker, you protect your environment by making sure that people could live in communities where the air quality is good. Speaker, so, you know, when you try side rail bills, come with something with sense, Mr. Speaker. If you come, seriously, come with if you have nothing, I know it's very hard, Mr. Speaker. It's got to be hard. I mean, let's think about it, right? You think it has to be hard in North Abaco for the F&M government to have to come and take care of their base? So you have to understand, their base is being challenged right now. And they're scared. Their base is being challenged right now. So they cry politics. Their base is being challenged right now. That's why Angleston and Cat Island has to try and railroad by jumping up and down and taking this thing to social services and taking this thing to the small thing. Mr. Speaker, it's about, Mr. Speaker, it's about dealing with their base, Mr. Speaker, that they're running scared. Mr. Speaker, their base, Mr. Speaker, are Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, their base, Mr. Speaker, want tax exemptions. Their base, Mr. Speaker, want to be able to benefit from this bill. Mr. Speaker, you see, it's funny, right? One day they come and they talk about VAT and the Bahamian people getting taxed, and they have this corned beef in the front of them, right? And that's fine. But they get up the corned beef in the front of them, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is this. While we see the necessity to save our economy, to save our country, to save our future, we're now being able to show Bahamians that we understand your cry. But let's help you in this way. Let's help you in this way. Let's make sure that you don't have to worry about paying these taxes. Let's help you in this way that you could not worry about customs duties, taxes. But they don't want to say that. They don't want the Bahamian people to know that. They want the Bahamian people to stay angry. They want the Bahamian people to say that this is politicized. Well, Mr. Speaker, we can get political on them because we can go in their base and we can do better than what they did in their base. And you can call it what you want to call it. I call it development. I call it urban development at a different level and at a level what the Bahamian people expects of us. Mr. Speaker, it's F&M urban renewal. It's real urban renewal. It's helping every Bahamian. And Tall Pines want to help every Bahamian. Tall Pines wants to help our cousins and brothers and sisters in our inner city. Tall Pines want to see the empowerment of our Bahamians in our inner city. Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, wants to see a better Bahamas. Tall Pine remembers our obligation, our promises to the Bahamian people. Tall Pines want to say at the end of the day, because this can be the same crew, Mr. Speaker, when election come again, they can be flicking through these pages, you know. They say they can do urban renewal and they can fix over the hill. What they do over the hill? They can say, what we do over the hill? We can say, well, we fix it. We're empowering the Bahamian people. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, Tall Pines supports this bill. Tall Pines supports Kalani in his efforts. Tall Pines support the F&M government in its effort to bring about true change, to help our brothers and sisters in the inner city, to do what's best for the Bahamian people. That's just the Tall Pines way, Mr. Speaker. That's the F&M way, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I'm proud, on the behalf of the people of Tall Pines, to support this Economic Empowerment Zone Bill 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Isles.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Golden Isles, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I wish first and foremost to give thanks and praise to Almighty God, Yahweh Elohim, who made it possible for all of us to be here in good health, strength, soundness of mind. I thank him for giving me favor with the residents in the great constituency of Golden Isles, on whose behalf I stand to represent and to be their voice maximized. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commence by extending condolences to all families throughout the Commonwealth in their hour of bereavement who have lost loved ones, especially and particularly the family of the late Apostle J. Rodney Coffee Roberts, to his wife, his children, officers, and members of Five Porches Deliverance Center and other affiliate churches under his leadership. As stated, he was an intelligent, fearless, courageous, disciplined, sometimes flamboyant, candid, plain-speaking, tongue-talking, prophesying, dynamic man of God. And he was unapologetically and unashamedly old school Pentecostal and apostolic. He was indeed, in my opinion, a 21st century prophet to this nation and will be greatly missed. Several weeks ago, he had a few special nights of services, an extended invitation to all of us as members of Parliament to attend. Sadly, only two of us did. The official leader of the opposition and myself, not knowing that would have been my last time seeing him alive. He has gone the way all mortals must go and has left a great legacy. May his soul, along with the souls of all of the righteous departed, rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak briefly to the matter at hand. We have come to this historic place to conclude deliberations on a landmark piece of legislation namely this Economic Empowerment Zones Bill 2018. Mr. Speaker, this bill is long overdue. Notwithstanding under intense scrutiny, there are some issues and concerns, particularly relating to its implementation and its administration and some other areas, understandably so. However, Mr. Speaker, I think the intent, the purpose, the spirit out of which this bill was conceived, I am sufficiently satisfied that this bill has the potential to impact and to bring social and economic restoration and rejuvenation to those challenged and depressed heritage areas it will undoubtedly impact. Mr. Speaker, I should like at this time to lobby for the oldest of the heritage villages on the island of New Providence, and that's the Adelaide village. That Adelaide be added to the list that presently includes Fox Hill, Gambia, and other areas. These communities were all birthed out of familiar circumstances, no fault of the original inhabitants. And now almost 200 years later, the conditions are similar in the said villages. So I am making an appeal to the honorable member of Kalani, our Prime Minister, whose baby this is, and we would like for Adelaide, sir, to be included. So please, whatever necessary adjustments, amendments, to be included and listed to benefit from the Economic Empowerment Initiative. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, the initial areas to be impacted under the Over-the-Hill Community Development Partnership Initiative, Bain and Grantstown and parts of Centerville, St. Barnabas, and an historic area known as Delancey Town. To understand the socio-economic conditions of the said areas, we must know and understand the history connected. Mr. Speaker, there's a common saying that says, the hands that shaped yesterday shapes today. And the hands shaping today will shape tomorrow. The past, the present, and the future are all intertwined. Mr. Speaker, there was a village that's no longer in existence now, known as Carmichael Village. In 1824, some Africans inhabited the place some 10 miles south of the city of Nassau. These villages, Carmichael Village, Adelaide Village, Gambia, these villages, Mr. Speaker, were inhabited by Africans who were never enslaved. In 1807, February 22nd, the slave trade was abolished. And so any ships found transporting Africans to become enslaved were taken to the nearest port. They were set free. Hence, Adelaide Village, Gambia, Carmichael Village were established. However, Mr. Speaker, Carmichael Village is no longer in existence. And it's because of the distance it was from the city, most or all of the residents eventually moved uptown and others just died. In 1825, a number of Africans migrated and created an establishment that became and is today known as Grantstown. This area proved to be ideal for farming because there were no irrigation problems since water was discovered near the Earth's surface. The village's development and extension was completed by J.J. Burnside, Surveyor General, under Major General Sir Lewis Grant's administration, and thus the area became known as Grant's Town. During the 1830s, Grantstown became increasingly successful and densely populated, making rapid extensions necessary to appease the growing demand for land. They eventually occupied the vacant land west of Grantstown that became known as Baintown, reportedly named after one of the residents. Baintown was divided into two distinct districts, that of the Congo and Nango towns. Dr. Enos established and proved the relationship between the Yorubas and the Congos of Baintown and those of Fox Hill. Mr. Speaker, that area, not too long ago, prior to 1967, that area, in the Grantstown, mainly the Grantstown area, parts of Baintown also, was an economic hub for the over the hill. A nightlife that is still talked about today. Tremendous entertainment. There was the Drumbeat Club. There was the Banana Boat Club. Paul Mayer's Club. The Cat and the Fiddle. The Silver Slippers. The Reinhardt Hotel. Olive's Guest House. Paul, thank you for the correction. But, yes. Also, the Kentucky Springs Hotel, Zanzibar. Also, Mr. Speaker, Bodie Bank on Wolf Road, the People's Penny Savings Bank in different locations. Mr. Speaker, on Lewis Street, the building is still erected that served as the then headquarters for the UNIA, the United Negro Improvement Association, that was headed by one of the most successful black leaders in the history of the movement, the late, the Honorable Marcus Garvey. He frequently visited. Also the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. visited this historic area. Mr. Speaker, the sad thing about it was the areas in question. Mr. Speaker, persons in those areas were socially, economically depressed deliberately, at a time in this country's history when persons who sat in this chamber, historic place, did not look like us, did not think like us, did not care about, and in many instances for us. Mr. Speaker, this initiative, Mr. Speaker, This initiative, and this,
Honorable members, the member for Golden Eyes has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, one of the wonderful lessons that we should have learned prior to 1967 was how important it is to economically, financially support each other. We did it prior to 67. And that's why that area was so thriving economically. But it was post-1967. The Progressive Liberal Party at that time held their conventions in Zanzibar, the Southern Recreation Ground, and Windsor, historic sites for rallies. But Mr. Speaker, what happened after 1967? Economically, has not been favorable to those communities. The persons, those areas, Mr. Speaker, that were once occupied by what I would term as indigenous Bahamians has changed and changed drastically. You'd be surprised to know who owned a lot of the land in that area. One of the things we did not do, one of the things we did not do, Mr. Speaker, was to teach our people the value and the importance of land. Okay? We did not appreciate it then, and sadly to say in many instances, we do not understand or appreciate it now. Oh, I love that. You please put your mic up and repeat that loud. Please, I'd love, oh, please. Okay. But this, Speaker. Yes. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this.
Honorable members.
It's a wonderful initiative, Mr. Speaker, but it will not be easy to accomplish. Mr. Speaker, members. This will take tremendous commitment and dedication. This will take discipline. Mr. Dr. Ron Malana Karenga stated, and I repeat, a people who refuse discipline will in the end be destroyed because of the lack of it. Mr. Speaker, I remember growing up, very young years, in Bahamas, where Bahamians were clean. Didn't have a lot of money. Clean. Didn't have electric iron. What is it called? Gooseneck? Goose iron. Mr. Speaker, we're dressed, well dressed. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, what amazes me, some of those same areas that's filthy today, persons grew up who did not have the modern day rakes, did not have the landscaping tools today, had either a coconut limb or they cut a branch from a tree, let it dry up, and they would sweep and keep those yards and property immaculate. What has happened to that generation, Mr. Speaker? The mannerly, respectful, particularly for the elderly, almost a sense of reverence, God-fearing, love church, hard-working and industrious. I could vividly recall, I had the examples, my father, my grandparents, my mother, they were workers. It died shortly after that generation. What happened, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this initiative will take strong hands, keen eyes, caring spirits, and people who have a spirit of patriotism and nationalism, who love this country. Mr. Speaker, I remember the time when we were proud to be Bahamians. Didn't have all of what we have now, but we were proud to be Bahamians. This is what it will take to accomplish this initiative. The descendants of the original inhabitants, the indigenous Bahamians, in this process must not be overlooked, especially that black male. In these areas of gang-infested, crime-ridden, self-esteem at an all-time low. Mr. Speaker, what we need is our black young men who are reaping havoc in our country. We must not overlook them. We must rescue them. We must. They must be rescued. The leadership involved in this initiative must be firm but fair. The implementation, the administration, the participation must move with caution, care, and a level of sensitivity. This must not be allowed to become simply another urban gentrification exercise. This bill has tremendous potential. And it's at this time I'd like to publicly commend the Honorable Member for Kalani. And I know in the initial stage of this bill, there was some internal fight for this bill. For those areas, there were persons in this country who did not and do not want it, because it's not to their economic, to benefit them economically or financially. But he was courageous, he stood, and he held on to it, and now, on the precipice of bringing it to fruition, to reality. Mr. Speaker, the people of that historically rich, those historically rich heritage areas, this, as I stated earlier, is long overdue. I wish to emphatically state that I, the member for Golden Eyes, support the Economic Empowerment Zones Bill 2018. May Almighty God, Yahweh Elohim, continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and make the wealth more common. This is the part of that process, in my opinion. Long live the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. God bless you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador, just before you rise, I wish to bring to the attention of the Parliament that the Speaker and the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party and leader of the official opposition had an opportunity to meet last evening. It was, in my estimation, a very productive and fruitful meeting. And I'm happy for the sequence in the speakers today, in that I'm making these remarks following the member for Golden Isles, whom I know is committed and dedicated to the Word of God and to the advancement of spiritual values within the Bahamas. I believe that he is a patriotic and nationalistic person. And I also feel the same way about the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador. I believe that he is patriotic, nationalistic in his approach, and that he would want to see the advancement of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Our meeting yesterday evening was based on that foundation. And I believe it was fruitful and productive. And I believe that God is good. I received a letter from someone who indicated to me that the speaker you seem to be wearing your fate on your sleeves. And I am not ashamed of that fact, because I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, I'll just give you a brief history before the member for Cat Island speaks. And it's a very interesting history in my estimation. And I say God is good, because I sit here today as a testimony of God's goodness. In 1992, I was taken to court for the first time and only time in my life. I was represented by the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador. I was taken to court for registering to vote in Inagua and Maguana in the 1992 general elections. I was taken to court by the Free National Movement. God is good. I was the candidate for the Progressive Liberal Party. I received PLP training. I still have the book by Machiavelli, The Prince, that was handed to me. I was trained by Kendall Nottage, and who was assisted by Andrew Dud Maynard. After a short period of time after 1992, I entered the political wilderness in third-party politics. And I was at the time the leader of the Bahamian Freedom Alliance. So I was attacking the Free National Movement, and I was attacking the Progressive Liberal Party. And I was receiving attacks from both. As a third party, I was in the valley of the shadow of death. And death blows were being thrown from both giants. And so, it is interesting that I sit here today. At the invitation of the member for Kalani, I became a member of the Free National Movement. And I became elected for the Nassau Village constituency. I received F&M training as a consequence. And the same Andrew Dud Maynard was a part of the F&M training. And so I say God is good, because I happen to be the speaker who has PLP heritage, PLP training, third-party wilderness experience, and Free National Movement training and experience. Now, I understand the role of the speaker is to be impartial. And we had this discussion last night. And I'm satisfied, despite what might come into the future and what might have already happened, that the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador was sincere in our discussions concerning the way forward. And I want this Parliament and the official opposition to know that despite the, what I would call, chaotic and unfavorable weather of the past year, and maybe the tumultuous experience, that when we recess and return, this speaker intends to be as impartial as is humanly possible. And while though maintaining the rules to ensure that this institution maintains the highest possible standards that is possible as we progress this country towards higher planes. And so I believe that as a result of that meeting last night, we have arrived at a new position and a new standard to advance this Parliament and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I want to thank the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador for exhibiting the type of political maturity that was exhibited during our meeting last night. And with those words, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just confirm, I'll confirm the, I confirm our conversations, I confirm, and I concur with the sentiments, and we look forward to a relationship going forward in this chamber that will continue to uphold the standards that you all have come upon. I thank you for that. I forgot I represented. And I'm also proud that you have not in any way have dished the training you received through the PLP, and you have embraced it. Mr. Speaker, today marks 2 days since we lost a great son of our country, my friend and ardent supporter, Bishop Rodney Coffey Roberts. I do not know, I'm afraid, I've been truthful. The Speaker, did accept his invitation to attend this church. Didn't know that would have been the last time. I met the member for Golden Isles there, and I could say that we were both anointed with some prophecies, which we'll not speak about today. But as you said, God is good. Bishop Roberts is one who came from a mighty long way, reached the higher heights of accomplishment in this society. His story is one which our young people can and should emulate. From humble beginnings, he became a writer, a singer, and an unwavering proclaimer of the Word of God. He was a strong spiritual leader within the community of the Grove, and through his television and audio ministry, he was renowned throughout the Bahamas. I take this time to extend condolences to his wife, his children, and the church community of 5 Porches of Deliverance. I also wish to add my voice to my colleagues' expressions of condolences on the passing of Kenton Nemo. He was a patriotic Bahamian, was deeply committed to the national development of our country and its people. He was a strong advocate and astute politician who moved from the PLP to the CDR to the FNM and then came full circle. He wanted transformation in our politics. On this past Monday, he lost a fierce battle. He was a soldier in the army. He gave his best. He has left us far too soon. I again extend condolences to his family on behalf of my wife and the wider PLP family. I also join colleagues in this place and the country at large in expressing my deep condolences to the family of the late Basil L. Sands Sr. Mr. Sands, who is the father of the MP for Elizabeth, was a brilliant man. He was a pioneer in his field as an accountant. At the time when his professional career began, many did not know much of the profession. He launched and founded his own practice and was successful beyond measure. He was the founding president of the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants. In politics, he was a supporter of the PLP. I continually remind the member for Elizabeth that he should listen to his daddy, not Papa. He never wavered in that support, nor did he hide it. Whether we were in or out of government, he demonstrated his love for and support of the PLP. His solid commitment to the progressive cause was never taken for granted. As a PLP, he was unselfish, he was humble, he was kind. Today, evidence of that progressive contribution sits within in this chamber in the person of the member for Elizabeth, whom I noted. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, extend heartfelt sympathy to his wife, Roberta, his children, Sandy, Diane, Basil, Renee, and Ernie, Dr. Sands. He, Speaker, was extremely proud of all of them. I would be remiss, too, if I do not lend tributes to the family of the legendary Everett Elisha Obed Ferguson, who in 1975 defeated Miguel V. Oliveira for the World Boxing Light Middleweight Championship. That moment for me was a proud one. His championship was won just 8 months after my call to the Bahamas bar. And I can never forget the legendary call by Ed Bethel, who was in the stadium announcing that fight to us Bahamians at home. He forgot he was the announcer, forgot that he was the announcer, and just went wild like a fan, describing the blows and how Obed was going to kill him. Obed killing him. I'll never forget those words. Mr. Speaker, you know, as I said, this victory came about 8 months after his call to the bar. My call to the bar was uplifting for me and my family. I never thought that there would be another event that would be so inspiring and uplifting, but this victory was. Back then, the Bahamas was an infant nation, resolute and punching our way to the top of the world. I celebrate his life and legacy by noting that even now, the new generation of Bahamian athletes are making their mark in this world. In midst of our grief, our fallen, significant personalities of the Bahamas, we have some joy. An uplifting spirit that celebrates our successes in swimming, with Joanna Evans down at the Sigan Games, setting world records. In track and field, with Miller Ubio, Shawnee Miller. In basketball, Ubo. In basketball, with DeAndre Ayton being the #1 draft pick in NBA. We are still punching our way to the top, Mr. Speaker, and I dare say we are punching above our weight. And each moment that occasions us opportunities to shine on the world stage, we ought to seize it. And so I was saddened that we have, unfortunately, canceled the IAAF relays. That would have showcased our talents to the world on our own soil. This is unfortunate. The people's time government is just a slogan, an empty catchphrase, because the truth is, this government is not for the people. People's time is just for the sound bite for them. And I say that because of incidents like this, decisions like this. This is the government who embraces the ill-fated ideals of canceling, stopping, and blocking opportunities for people. Our young people's hopes have been dashed. They can't be serious. The country's reputation will suffer as a result of this cancellation. Our global brand is likely to be shot to pieces. This is a shame, a disgrace, and a poor display of judgment. And as soon as these athletes be coming home with their gold medal, they can be the first one at the airport, praising them, when we could have had, we had an opportunity of a lifetime. Jamaica and other countries are now just scrambling, laughing at us. I was in Jamaica 2 Fridays ago to an event, and they're smiling, right? I've done so in private. I'm constrained to ask, Prime Minister, once again, please reconsider this decision if it's not too late. If nobody else on that side, and you should know better. You should know better, Prime Minister Kalani. Don't let our young people down. Stop blocking their chance to shine. I want you to stand up and defend them. Stand up for them. Instead of jetting around the world and calling us all corrupt, man, do something that could expose the good of us on the world stage. The IAAF was an event for that. Many of those young people who would have participated, whose spirit could have been uplifted, where despair and angst and anger could have been dissipated by just being involved and watching our own compete. Right? That's something positive for our young people. Those young people come from the communities that this bill is directed or aimed at, as you said. Mr. Speaker, you know, the over-the hill communities represented the underpinnings of what is truly meant to be Bahamian. It was within these areas we were taught the importance of hard work, family, and a deep sense of community. For the most part, those communities, the elders in particular, were the fabric that knitted us together. Over the Hill was built on the foundation and gives us a rich history and an enduring pride. Baintown, Grandstown, along with Centerville, other communities like the Grove, Engliston, 5 Pound Lot, Adelaide Village, Gambia Village. They fostered an evolution of a professional class of black Bahamians. Those Bahamians have contributed to the political and economic system of our country. And, you know, I see the other side continually trying to rewrite history about the PLP and what the PLP may or may have not done. Well, I can say to all of them over there, they would not have been there today, would not have had the degrees or other professional qualifications they have today were not for the PLP. And if you want, Speaker, if you want a clue to establish that fact, I laid in this house several years ago, right, the yellow pages of the directory of 1967 and 69. Just look at that. I also laid next to that, right, the yellow pages of the directory for 1992. That tells the story of what the PLP did. It was directed at people. That tells the story, Mr. Speaker. Because if you look at that, look at how many accountants there were listed in 1967. No more than 4. Look at the number that is now, look at the numbers that were shown in 1992. Over 300 was then listed. And you can look at across the spectrum of professionalism. That's what the PLP did. Mr. Speaker, in every generation, a government would have a different target. In 1967-69, when the PLP came into power, one of the most damning inhibitors for progress was education. So it was that regime, that generation, sought to remove the ignorance from our eyes and ears by educating us. And educated they did. Right? When, after 1992, the new government came in, they thought, well, I want to broaden democracy. One way I'm going to do that is by opening up the airwaves. So every generation has something to do. Today, our generation, I think, needs to pick up the mantle to attempt to recalibrate the minds of our people, to bring them back to values of which we grew up on and understood. You know, values of truth and honesty, forgiveness, good work ethics. That is what we have another role to play, Mr. Speaker. Every generation will have that. And so you don't criticize what's happening, because I could say to you all today, right, from 1992 to date, the FNM has had, that's 26 years. Of the 26 years, we all have had 16 of them. And we're still addressing problems. Right? And as I said, you're good at describing the problems, as the Prime Minister did when he was at the UN. But we are weak in prescriptions and providing the solutions and prescriptions. So, Mr. Speaker, I speak about the internet. So today, Mr. Speaker, there is a contrasting version of this story. There is the reality of neighborhoods facing the plight of violence fueled by social and economic inequalities. Under, Mr. Speaker, their blanket of poverty are broken homes, unemployment, poor health, that dim the hope and dreams of so many young people and young Bahamians. They are gripped in the struggle, and that struggle is real, Mr. Speaker. It is as real as was told yesterday by the member for Engliston concerning the travails of her people and the inefficiencies of the Department of Social Service. Speaker, I recognize, Mr. Speaker, I recognize the urgent need to respond to the challenges of these communities. We need a durable, long-term solution to their situation. However, the Prime Minister's highly touted concept of special economic zones is flawed. This bill is flawed.
Honorable members.
It's
Honorable member for Cat Island. I reluctantly intervene. Honorable member for Engliston, you cannot be shouting these unparliamentary remarks across the floor. You'd better believe it because no other person in here is using these unparliamentary words that you are using. Have your seat. Have your seat. Have your seat.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Cat Island, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, but, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, the Economic Empowerment Zone Bill, Mr. Speaker, is flawed. And its chief flaw is the fact that it offers no further enrichment. Sorry, it offers further enrichment to the rich at the expense of the poor. That is what this is all about, Mr. Speaker, as I see it. This initiative is what I call the cart before the horse. It dangerously falls short of addressing the structural challenges plaguing the over-the-hill communities. The over-the-hill communities and economic woes are long-standing and have been exacerbated by educational and economic gaps. Now, with the increasingly specter of illegal migrants, who in some instances occupy entire streets, the situation is even more complex. This is the state of the inner city. Some areas having broader inequalities than others. And while much has been made of the role of the special economic zone to be created under this act, arguably, I say it lacks the necessary protections. This lack of protection will catalyze the exploitation and marginalization of residents in those zones. The question I ask, who wins? Who loses? For example, if a landlord uses the concessions granted under the bill to improve their rental property, can the Prime Minister assure tenants that the direct impact of this initiative will not result in the displacement of those tenants? Can he assure this House? And what are his solutions when displacements occur? The great concern within this framework is that all qualifying individuals who stand to benefit will not reflect significantly those residing in these areas. The point is, you're not going to help the vast majority who are under these rough living conditions. Mr. Speaker, what the government has dubbed special economic zones will be special, in my view, special exploitation zones. So the question I ask again is, who wins? Who loses? How will this initiative improve economic and educational outcomes? How will this program, Economic Empowerment Zone program, address the urgent challenges of the lack of income, poor health, and family instability? Or this, how will this program transform communities challenged by violence and highly constrained dreams? Looking at the bill, it comes up short, and there's no reasonable response, I think. Who wins? The Prime Minister. Who loses? I'm not ignoring the lucrative investment opportunities being advanced through this policy. I'm not ignoring that. What I do recognize, though, is the negative social and economic will cost more to maintain than the benefits this program may bring to those who you say is directed at, the poor. For example, again, what happens when the investor, the rich again, takes advantage of the outline concessions, takes advantage without delivering substantial employment and do not improve the social infrastructure? That's something to be answered. Crucially, the focus on creating these special economic zones, if I may call it that, does not address the problem at the heart of these communities. The National Development Plan, which has been abandoned, which was an evidence-based policy movement that contained thorough ideas directly cure the ills, could have been a guide. But, as I understand it, it's been thrown away. The varying possibilities of economic exclusion will not improve poverty trends and will present an added barrier to economic mobility. We need to uplift the poor, not the rich. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's attempt to improve low-income neighborhoods as a special economic zone by the offerings of tax breaks and concessions must determine first whether the program helps residents of low-income communities. And it must carefully examine how to avoid the inevitable reality of gentrification from this policy. The economic distress in the over-the-hill community is a problem that urgently and unequivocally needs a solution indeed. However, it needs a solution that creates the environment for favorable and fair treatment. We must ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the policies created to transform communities are people-oriented, people-centered, and people-driven. These policies should encourage accessibility to employment first. Mr. Speaker, and I repeat that, these policies should encourage accessibility to employment first. They should consider closing of educational gaps through skills training integrated with the National Training Agency. We must create a path to accessing capital and business grants for residents to meaningfully benefit from the concessions outlined in the program. We must closely measure the net effect of these concessions on investment and how it benefits local residents. That is what a people's time, people-driven, people-centered approach will focus on first. But contrary to this approach, Mr. Speaker, this framework is guaranteed to increase property values, increase rents, and lead to higher business profitability. I repeat that. This bill, right, this framework is guaranteed to increase property values, increase rents, and lead to higher business profitability. In short, Mr. Speaker, this does not benefit the vulnerable. This hurts the poor. This displacement policy will favor one side, creating concessions and loopholes and promoting gentrification. It will cater the highest returns to businesses and investors who will take advantage of the tax-free incentives. Meanwhile, the poor and the vulnerable will be left to pay 60% more in VAT on goods and services. Meanwhile, the poor and the vulnerable pay 12% VAT. It is unclear, Mr. Speaker, whether residents in the over-the-hill area will benefit or be kicked out. How does the government intend to achieve a balance between promoting development and how to protect existing residents? Has to be that balance. How are they going to do that? Again, I ask the question, Mr. Speaker, who wins and who loses? It is therefore imperative that policymakers involved in the implementation of this framework provide a transparent and rigorous evidence-based traceability method to help determine the success or failure of the program when this provision comes up for renewal again. In the absence of collecting evidence and an unevaluated program in the future, how can we make sure we know whether this program has worked when it comes to renewal? And I trust that that will be happening. I think also, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must satisfy the residents in these areas that the ripple effects of this initiative will not hurt the most vulnerable. Again, the poor, those deprived by the system, those who are unemployed and need help, and not just need help, but need help now. The Prime Minister should be made aware during the implementation phase of his personalized, politically wrapped initiative that gentrification ultimately negatively impacts the least advantaged. truly renewing the communities by providing opportunities through innovative solutions to poverty require an urban policy. Perhaps those opposite did not take that into consideration. An urban policy where the most vulnerable groups, that is, Bahamians, shunted into the most disadvantaged neighborhoods across our country, is given a pathway to the highest quality of life. But I guess that is asking too much from this government, who is only seen to be concerned about awarding benefits to the rich people. I could substantiate that thing. You want me to substantiate it? And just go back and look at all your recent tax concessions. What, Mr. Speaker, what is additionally required are policies aimed at improving the housing options. We need to deliver economic opportunities which produce better neighborhood conditions without favoring the affluent and hurting the poor. The over-the-hill communities need people-oriented policies which enable less advantaged groups to transform their realities into better living neighborhoods. Neighborhoods with better schools, equipped with the latest technologies, communities whose healthcare needs are readily accessible. This is what those communities need. A greater economic opportunity, creating more inclusive economic development instead of the exclusive economic development for those residents living over the hill. The people, not the rich, Mr. Speaker. What is needed is a whole, what I call a whole of government approach to address the root causes of the over-the-hill communities. The bill before us seeks only to deal with economic conditions and leave out such glaring policy and administrative issues such as better schools, enhanced clinics, and access to real financing. The over-the-hill residents need jobs, job opportunities that will empower their upward growth. They need to be able to own businesses to allow them to elevate themselves. They need highest standard of environmental control, removing of roadside garages, public infrastructure such as sidewalks, road paving, sanitation, etc. And it just goes on and on, Mr. Speaker. That's why we need a whole government approach. When I said earlier that the Prime Minister and his government had put the cart before the horse, I was referring precisely to the government being able to address these conditions. There's now talk of local government for new province. It is an initiative we on this side welcome, but it is precisely through local level government that we might revive and resuscitate our over-the-hill communities. But I think that idea is just probably just talk, plenty talk, as is always. The local government minister has already been removed from his portfolio, and guess what? We still don't know why. We must get serious. This government has not demonstrated logic in its rationale. The program will not do it. This program will not do it. It is a policy initiative that they are codifying, and we will, of course, as a government's policy initiative, we support it. But these are our comments on it. Because this program, Mr. Speaker, will provide additional exploitation of the residents living in these areas. When they are pushed out by the greed of business interests, where will they go? What is the plan for them, Mr. Prime Minister? Do you have a plan for the people who already have been fired by your government, for example? That's displacement. When a tenant can't pay the rent anymore, you have to find a place to go. Just like when you fire people, you should find out where they're going to go to work. Right? So, pull the rug from you. Thousands have been fired. Some simply for being Bahamian. And now you want to send the greedy. I don't victimize. Now you want to send the greedy into destroy the small communities. While the over-the-hill communities will become areas exploited for profit, the poor, I say, will not benefit. Much of what is in the bill, much of what the bill seeks to achieve, is already present in various extant pieces of legislation. In policies and programs such as the Urban Renewal Program and in agencies such as the Ministry of Works, the Department of Environmental Health, the Real Property Tax Act, and indeed customs regulations. All those things, and you go to any of them and just come up with this. This probably is now becoming the one-stop shop. But you don't necessarily need this bill to achieve what I see the policy objectives of this act are set out. These efforts can be achieved already. I warn the government that I'm afraid that there will be an overlapping of procedures and of administrative arrangements. Nothing substantive will be achieved. While there are potential for economic benefits to distressed communities across the over-the-hill areas, I say the devil will be in the details, and only time will tell. Despite the good intentions, the Prime Minister continues to overlook the highlighted and the unintended negative consequences of this bill. Pretty much in the same way that he misled this Parliament with that bad Oban deal, he has overlooked the consequences of the special exploitation zones. The program favors some people or companies over residents, just like the Oban deal. We cannot emphasize enough how critical it is that these concessions benefit the people that they are impacting, meaning the residents who are in the zone. The government has an uncompromising obligation in the implementation of these economic zones to prevent tax breaks and economic incentives that will disproportionately harm low-income residents and local businesses. I personally believe that concessions or economic activities that do not translate into new activities or harm low and moderate income residents will be contrary to the government overall policy. That's what I believe. That's why I say you could. But you need to look at these unintended consequences. That's what we are pointing out. We urge the government in advance to introduce a mechanism to identify practices that could and would constitute an abuse and further harm and do more harm than good for the persons who you claim that this bill is to empower. The government must create a safeguard against exploiters who will utilize loopholes to abuse the program. I want the Prime Minister, as I said, when he thinks about it, who wins, who loses with this bill? And I don't want the cheap answer like it's the people. This is an extraordinary state of affairs when the member of Kalani lacks a coherent plan to address the negative impacts that the economic empowerment zone bill will have on residents. Instead, he has come into this place and is an overnight expert on the history of the Progressive Party. He spends more effort telling old stories than demonstrating to the Bahamian people his understanding of what his decision will mean for real people. The poor people, the vulnerable people, the people who know and are saying it every day that it is their time. Who will win and lose with his government policies? Plainly stated, as in Oban, the rich and affluent, they win. Yesterday, the member of Kalani considered himself to be a friend of the poor. But I know no friend of the poor who would want to see our people kicked out of their homes. A friend introducing a policy framework that does very little to improve the lives of the poor. Creating a double burden on the over-the-hill residents. Is that what a friend of the poor do? And sadly, instead of addressing the root of the problem and what drives urban poverty, the member for Kalani offers this House a trickle-down economic policy that will not eliminate poverty. And it has been known that the trickle-down economic policy does not work in the Bahamas. I submit this government is no friend of the poor, and the Prime Minister and MP for Kalani is no trusted historian on the PLP. As I end my contribution, Mr. Speaker, I encourage the government to address some of these gaps. I want them addressed because domestic and foreign investors will win, and small local SMEs in the over-the-hill communities will lose, and the poor will likely lose. The Prime Minister needs to rethink his strategies because I have serious doubts that this program will generate any spillovers to the wider community. If the government fails to address the connected social and economic challenges and does not promote social developmental linkages, educational training, and economic upgrading, this economic empowerment program will be the greatest broken promise of our lifetime. Time reveals the truth, no matter how much you beautifully weave it in the thread of lies. With time, the knots open and the truth comes out. Time, Mr. Speaker. What the people's time government should know, that the truth will eventually be revealed. No lies last forever. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for the indulgence of allowing me to go over by 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Back to you. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pinewood.
Mr. Speaker, I rise by the grace of God for the good of Pinewood and the good of my brethren to whom this bill will impact. There's a song say, all of we are one family, all of we are one. And we can't be happy being on one side of the flood, benefiting, and do not celebrate when there are opportunities to uplift our brothers. The thing about government is like the maritime saying, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. I listened to this debate, and I must quite frankly say that at one turn it's almost a waste of time to even speak, because if you listen to what everybody else has said, especially the resounding speech given by my good brother, Mr. Vaughan Miller, the MP for Golden Isles. And if you listen to the introduction that was done by our Prime Minister, I mean, I have to borrow the old Toyota commercial. Who could ask for anything more? What actually began to resonate in me, you know, is when I listened to the opposition and I realized that there remains but a problem that needs to be addressed here. And it's a serious Achilles heel. I find myself becoming so constantly offended when I hear the word and my brothers and sisters describe as the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor. And it began to register in me like, what y'all think about us? The narrative has been crafted so much so that it begins to distract from the word empowerment, the bringing a sense of victimization to the mindset of the people who we seek to empower. You poor, so you can't benefit from this. This isn't no good. And actually, I wanted to ask the member for Cat Island and P.S. Salvador if I could have page 27 and 28 of his presentation, please, if you don't mind. Just pass it to me. I don't want to misrepresent his thought. If he would, he could pass it. Page 27 and 28. Because, see, I'm here, I'm asking if I can have it, if you don't mind, please. Because I'm asking, I'm really asking, can I have page 27 and 28? It was read into the, then I would have to quote him. Because when I listen to these things, I begin to wonder, do we really believe in the unions? Because the member said some things, and I guess as the leader goes, so goes the party, and as the leader goes, so goes the nation. So when you see a former shoeshine newspaper boy who eventually started stitching pants and eventually becomes the most powerful man in the country, going back to his roots, that shows the character of this government. And when you see an opposition leader who articulates fares, and I would have quoted him, so I'll have to look at my copious notes, complaining of the fact that the higher land values that is attributed to this bill and the boost in business and the great amount of returns will accrue no benefit because of the poor people, like they can't handle higher land values. It shows the mentality of them. And it causes us to understand why in 30 years of government, the bastion of Bahamian civilization and growth and history have been so neglected. Because they don't believe that they deserve an opportunity to have like everybody else. The principle of the 30-year reign of the former administration, not all of it, has seemed to be one of enjoy the leaves and the fruit of the tree, but ignore the root. Every election they talk about the grassroots, and how important they are. And I begin to listen to how they use the word the poor, and I begin to feel as if maybe they were, the people in these same areas that we seek to empower were looked upon as political cattle to keep herded enough, give them enough grain to keep them happy, give them a long enough rope to keep them in bondage, and so that they will be there when we need them to vote again and again and again. It has the spirit of Willie Lynch, which shows how to indoctrinate slaves and to keep their mind in bondage. It does, because as a man thinketh so, see, if you can get to the point, charity is good, you know, but too much charity is wrong. It is bad. If a nation cannot fight for itself, it loses its strength, its personal integrity. Charity is the reflection of the character of a nation, not the method of national growth. If all of us relied on social services, who will reap the corn? Who would sow the seed? Who will develop this nation? But the character of a successful nation is how we treat our poor. But the mentality is not one of poverty. Christ himself says, the poor you will have with you always. But never did he say you must always be poor. He said, let the poor say, I am rich. And our member for Kalani is looking down from where he came from. And he said, you have the chance to say, I am rich. And all I hear in this place is, you don't care about the poor. Because we want their land value to increase. They can't achieve this. No, they can't achieve it because you don't believe they could achieve it. Land is the ultimate value. Not cash in the bank, you know, land is the ultimate value. It's okay to have people believing in us to the point to keep us in power so that we can keep them in a social conundrum where they over and over again they depend on social services, but it's a different thing to emancipate the people and trust them to be able to make their decisions. I am glad that the people in these over-the-hill communities are reaping so swiftly and naturally swiftly in the political realm the fruits of their political decision. So many great people came out of those grassroots areas. They've always been led by cabinet ministers and the strongest men politically in this country. But what has been done till this day and this time? All of them could boast how they were in the family islands or in the grassroots areas and how they grew up and how poor they were. But how many of them, instead of a handout, has built a ladder that Kalani is building down and say, I'm not just giving you a hand up, I'm building a ladder until the staircase is finished. Get out if you want to. And yet they stand here and listen to their debate. The poor, creating fear in the poor people that they consider poor. When I began to listen to them, you know, the only thing came back to my mind was, why are we here in this place as lawmakers if we don't even appreciate our own Constitution? Is there any real truth in the sense to governmentally, in the spirit of governments, which I believe the epidemic is changing under the theme, it's the people's time? Is there really a true poor Bahamian, or is it, as the member for Golden Isle says, the wealth has never been made common? Because truly under our laws, you know, the F&M isn't giving to the people of the Over the Hill charity. We're giving them their patronage. We're giving them their patrimony. We're giving them what is due to them under this country, and we're requiring of them to do what is expected: diligence, vigor, take responsibility, stand up, make it work. We're doing what government's supposed to do. What I did when I listened, and I was getting frustrated because they keep calling our people poor. Man, for God's sake, the prodigal son, while he was eating swine food, was rich. He had to come to himself and go back to his father, go back to his land, and become the prince he was. And you know what I did? And I'm going to do it for the sake of this house, you know, because sometimes we forget ourselves. Our Constitution, the preamble, says some things that will help us, and I hope the people over there listen and understand you aren't poor. There's no opportunity in this country you cannot achieve. And if one person can't do it, then two of you get together. And if two of you can't do it, then 10 of you get together. And if 10 of you can't do it, then 20 of you get together. And I guarantee you, with unity, there's nothing you cannot achieve. If you don't have the job, but your Grammy got the land, then negotiate with somebody in your community. Bring something together and make it happen. This issue of this mentality of us looking down on people, poor, 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 trying to be heroes, instead of being brothers and sisters to them, and giving them a ladder out of the state in which they're in, and being honest enough, Mr. Speaker, to remind them that this land is your land. This land is our land. To always be in this place and remember this is the people's house, the people's government. And yes, sir, it is the people's time. We need to stop it. So let me remind us about something, you know, in the same preamble. It says, whereas 481 years ago, the rediscovery of this family of islands, rocks and keys, herald the rebirth of a new world. And whereas the people of this family of islands recognizes that the perseverance of their freedom will be guaranteed by a national commitment to self-discipline. This is you over the hill. This is you over the hill, people. That wall that you're urinating on and marking up is a wall that could feed your people because it has history behind it. That park that you're littering and that will be redeveloped will make an opportunity to blossom business and bring something in to pay your mortgage. But it's up to you to be committed to these same principles: self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. I have not seen this in any other government since the beginning of the Pingling administration, and now here under the Hubert Minnis-led administration. We're not giving you charity. We are giving you the fact that we know and we believe in you, and we are saying this is your time. Make it work. And I personally am offended by all of those who should be here negotiating on behalf of the people who are in a state of poverty. See, you don't have to be poor. You can be in a state of poverty, but that don't make you poor. You could be in a state of poverty, but that does not make you poor. It's a different thing. Your mentality makes you poor. And we're asking the people to go along, add to this bill the same thing: discipline, loyalty, industry, respect, Christian value, a rule of law. If you mix that with this bill, this will not fail. It will succeed. I am so deeply offended. I wouldn't want these people negotiating nowhere with me, you know, because they'll be negotiating from a position of weakness. Because when they come and say, all right, time to redevelop over the hill, you know, we've been doing it for 30 years, but this is our mentality. These poor folk, they poor. So let's give them 2 chickens and 1 cow, and they're good. But when they negotiate for life and key, they're going to sit there and they're going to split in the nuances and say the value of the land, you know, and the houses and the ambience and the history. And they're not going to say, that's too good for Life at Key. We have a leader who understood and still understands what it is to have and to have not. And he's presenting a piece of legislation that simply says that no good thing we would withhold from you all over the hill. I can't make you step up, but I can surely put it in front of you. And we keep saying the poor. We neglecting the poor. The best thing you could do to a poor like Jack in the Beanstalk is give him some beans and say, brother, do what you want. These are magic beans inside this bill. You can plant it and you can watch it grow. You can climb your beanstalk and you can do what you need to do, but this is your opportunity to succeed. But the preamble goes on, you know. It says, now therefore. See, we understand that the people in Bean Towns are political cattle who we keep in bondage and hungry enough, so all we got to do is feed them during the political season and they will wolf for us. We understand that the people in these over-the-hill areas do not have Stockholm Syndrome. And I thank God that they broke that syndrome, where they have been so loyal to the people who have been ignoring them politically. And this is so, you know, can I show you the miracle in all of this? Our leader, the member for Kalani, launched his campaign home. Now, he ain't no preacher. But even when God started, he said start in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, then go to the uttermost part of the world. In other words, you say, start home. Now, if you listen to them, they sound like the other people. Can any good thing come out of Bean Town? And yes, Bean Town has been disappointed because there have been some hometown people who would have risen and forgotten them. And maybe some of them are scratching their head because they've never seen something like this before. In the first year of his administration, Kalani started planning in his first year. Administration started planning. In his first budget, his first money-making time, he put it in the budget and put the money where the mouth is. You have never seen a quicker political response to the plight of any society. He didn't wait until just before election. So you can't say this is an election ploy. This is a heartfelt commitment. I listened carefully, you know, even though I'm still waiting for page 27 and 28 for Cat Island's speech. One of the things that impressed me most when, and I noticed it on ZNS too. ZNS, Mr. Speaker, played it from our leader. And when he said, and he was talking about the seat, he said about the abandonment of the PLP of the over-the-hill area. And I listened carefully, you know, because as a man speak, out of the issue of a heart, a man speak, you hear me? Out of the issue of a heart, the abundance, whatever is in the side of there, it always comes out. And I listened carefully, you know, and I just smiled. He spoke about the PLP abandoning the over-the-hill area. He said they abandoned him. And I listened to this grown man who was the prime minister of this country, got his own money, really don't need, he could be like the other prime minister, you know, during the hurricane and say, I got a country to run, I ain't got time for my constituency. Well, he's running the constituency, running the country and making time for an area that's not his constituency. And I listened to the prime minister and he said this, you know, he said, you all abandoned the over-the-hill area. I say, okay. He said, you all abandoned us. No, see, that may have gone over your head. He said, and I could imagine, I seen this grown man, to me in my eyes, went into a fetal position and saw himself shining shoes, saw himself selling newspaper, saw himself like a child on the street in the over-the-hill area. And even though he's far removed from where he was born, he is looking at himself right now and still looking at these communities and saying, we. He said, you have abandoned us. And that caused me to understand and have the epiphany why he has that drive. He realized that he is helping his inner child by helping the community that he grew up in. He's not giving them charity. He's giving them the hope that he wished he had when he didn't have the ability to provide hope for himself. Yes, sir. And now that he's Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, he is immediately reaching back and ensuring that this collective of bedrock, Garden of Eden, people in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas make and have their time. We call them poor, but this is one thing I need to say to all of those, and I hope they say it, retract their statements, or say, oh, the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor. It says in our preamble, now, know now ye therefore, that we, the inheritors of, and the successors to, this family of islands. Every Bahamian in this country has a right in this country. They have a right to everything we own. It is called the public treasury because it's the Beans and Groundstown treasury too. It's called the public treasury because it is Angliston's treasury as well, and she will get a time, although Angliston, the member for Angliston seems to be playing political fun about a 30-feet road dividing the street. The promise was made, and if a leader could deliver within his first year on this promise, you have no credibility to stand here and doubt when he says, I am coming to you next. No, you have no credibility to doubt. No, that's a personal thing, but you have no credibility to doubt. All right? I didn't say you can't doubt. I said you have no credibility to doubt, meaning in your doubting it is flawed. But you can possess your flawed doubting. But the thing about it is, Mr. Speaker, I am concerned that our people in the communities who may have still support or favor towards those who look at them as poor charity cases may be so influenced that they may not take advantage of these bills. So I want to remind them about something, and I'm going to use an example that may seem a little bit odd. The value of a thing is based on location, location, location. And God has been building a time for this community to have this renaissance. When those roads were pushed through those communities and many people were complaining, they didn't realize that that was capital injection that began to elevate the people in those communities. Most of those lands are now prime property, prime commercial lands. We look at Carmichael Road and we see you can't afford property on Carmichael Road right now. So a lot of those people who may not have taken the time to investigate the value of Mama House now compared to when the FNM administration began to work to that community need to look again and find out you are not as broke as you think. The equity that you have in your land has already increased. We sit there and we look and say, well, there's only 5 million. No, you got to understand when Kalani said he's going to possibly bring in something that was equivalent to $52 million of rent and bring government buildings into your land, you got to realize what that does to that community. Your value continue to rise. Everything you do. So now your crown land that was that piece of land that you were on, that 30 years ago might have only been worth $8,000. You are now in the big leagues. So the difference is this. This is going to cause the community to have to think about itself. This is going to cause families to have to get together and resolve their differences. This is going to cause young people to have to talk with grandma and say, Mama, who's the land belong to? This is going to cause people to have to come together and say, you know what, we're going to have to make this happen. I hope this will cause the people in the over the hills to realize that for maybe the first time, since the Linden introduction to politics, that you would have found somebody who ready and is demonstrating that I am set and committed to you. And I want them to know that they should feel proud that the vote that they give is paying off so swiftly. Now, as you note that there is opposition to the bill. There is opposition to the bill. So I want to give the people in those areas a piece of advice, you know. When you get somebody fighting for you, cover them. When you get somebody going to bat for you, cover them. When you get somebody making things happen for you, cover them. And if you don't understand that, let me put it this way. You don't take your prize bull and shove him out to the pastures. If he's producing for you, cover him. This bill will begin to exemplify a renaissance and is already being agreed by the admonition of my good brother, Warren P. Miller from Golden Isles, that even now Adelaide, Gambia is now going to be included. Adelaide is going to be included in that. I am proud to be on a side, Mr. Speaker, that actually loves the poor, you know. We've seen that in the midst of our bills. And like the first ones who pass VAT and say, we don't care, we just want the money. Put it on everything, everyone. Drop it cold, drop it hard as a rock. We did what we could to make the adjustments, medical things, and things that would impact the poor. Despite the systematic imperfections of social services, we have increased subventions to help the poor. We partnered with organizations. Social service is not the end-all, be-all. Sometimes if you go to a doctor, you need a referral. Sometimes you go to PANMH, they refer you to doctors. Yeah? Sometimes if you need the thing, you send it to Great Commission. And see, listen to the tone of Anglican for Great Commission, speaking down to people they know. No, let me tell you why. Listen to the tone of it. Oh, go to Great Commission. Great Commission feed people, and no one have I ever heard had food poisoning.
Honorable member.
Had food poisoning. Had anything negative from Great Commission. That's an honorable work.
On a point of order by the member for Anglican.
The member speaking so loud he couldn't hear you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I made a comment to a colleague, and the member is seeking to draw on a comment I made and to go further to assign to a comment I made negative commentary. It's not allowed under the rules, Mr. Speaker, and I'm asking the member if he would, first of all, withdraw it, because I'm not speaking down to anybody. I was speaking to a colleague, and secondly, I said from my seat, and normally, you know, but, well, that's what we do, and you do it all the time. But in any event, Speaker, I would ask the member to withdraw his comments, please.
Honorable member for Pinewood.
Let me do this. Some things moving. I withdraw the comments and restate it this way. I was speaking of examples of how an institution may not have a capacity and make a referral to an institution that is able to fulfill that capacity. I am a leader who believes that as long as you get it, I'm happy, you know. I believe that. I believe that. I believe that if I can get something, I need to go to a PLP to get it, and that helps you, I will do that. So if you come to social services and you need something, and if you need a meal, and if for whatever reason,
We subsidize
if for whatever reason, I'm not speaking to that, I'm speaking about sharing. If for whatever reason, if there is someone there that provides a quality service,
Yes.
there's no problem. That's all I'm simply saying to it, you know. And be not despised. We all need services. When hurricane hit this country, we take it from the church, we take it from Red Cross, we take it from Rotary, we take it from Kiwanis. In other words, what we're simply saying is all of we are one in this place. But what I'm simply saying, again, to this bill, and this is very, very important to us, I want the people over the hill to realize that their land value far exceeds that of the opinion with other people is being given to you. You are just a stone throw away from Bay Street. You're bordered by Collins Avenue with the richest set of commercial land. You are in a mecca and in a zone. And it would be remiss of any government not to look at you and see your true value. And I want them to understand that this is your time. And I will remind them about some people who might have looked so obscure in the eyes of other people, who had the audacity to believe in their own gifts and calling. People like Amos Ferguson, who sat there, and he's one of the greatest intuitive artists. Amos was a man, he say he painted by divine unction. If you were to look at it through the natural eyes, this man painting chicken scratch. Look like something that children do. Picking up cardboard off the side of the road and house paint. I mean house paint. Painting things with house paint. Living on the side there. But was able to command worldwide acclaim for his artisans and his work and be paid tens of thousands of dollars. I don't look at a person for where he is. I look into the heart of a man and say what God has called you to be. And over the hill is a great potential. Over the hill must succeed because over the hill represents us. I find it so deeply hypocritical that any administration, especially the greater ones that has a claim to fame like the PLP, would speak about how powerful the movement was and the grassroots was, and making and bringing about change in this country and causing the unrest and the stability that made this country what it is today. Yet they turn around, and when you look at the record, all they did was ride the horse. All they did was ride the horse. They did not even allow the horse that brought them to so many Kentucky Derby wins to even eat the blossom of the bouquet. But now when they have somebody making an effort to elevate the people, they sit there and they look at them and said, what you're offering in page 27 and 28 of Cat Island, Rumpke, and South Salvador speech, that what you're offering them is too much because it's too fast. It can make them too rich. And other people can come in and take their things. All I need to tell the people in Beans and Ground Sound is your land. It's your land. Nobody here trying to take your land. We saying don't be stupid. Here your land value going up, don't sell it. Work the plan that the same Sushang boy telling you. Because obviously he had a plan. He worked his plan. It didn't work overnight. His child didn't get the cornflakes till he come back to Nassau. He been through all of that. But now he's to a successful place. Follow somebody who's been there, done that, and has proven that he can make a success of himself. Follow somebody who's been where you are and love you enough to meet you where you are and take you where he is going. Follow the first prime minister in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas since the beginning of Sir Lyndon Pilden that is showing a heart and a commitment to our historic bedrock community. Follow the prime minister who looks at your pain, who looks at your abandonment, and don't say you, don't say them, don't say poor people. He looks at you and he said, us. We were abandoned. So I guarantee you, over the hill. And next time, Angliston will deliver that baby for our prime minister as well. That this is your time. I'll give you one little piece of advice. You don't always need money to interject into things. The prime minister is investing and overseeing your renaissance. I want to encourage you, put down your guns, man. We could build a Waldorf Astoria, we could turn you into the Beverly Hills of the Bahamas, but the stigma of crime keeps your value down. We could bring the business to your shops over the hill and give you opportunities. But if the people don't feel safe, talk to your children, man. Talk to them not only about the things they're doing wrong, but talk to them about the things that they can do that is right. All of you from academia that have been over the hill and have been moved around, who understand Grammy, you couldn't spell her own name, but it has taken you to the heights of academia. You need to go back in and start speaking to Grammy. You need to talk to your cousin and the uncle. To the young ladies that are out there who found other use of their body for economic empowerment, we want to say from a cultural perspective, you can now dance and make money. You could be like a penis tailor and beat on the drum and people are going to come again. If you have an idea of what the Over the Hill could do, go back and discuss and understand the cat and the fiddle. Understand this formula, because we need the way out, need to go back in. These hotels were fed by Over the Hill. People came here to see your talent, your skills, and Over the Hill, and they end up staying in Montague. They end up staying in these other hotels around town. But they came to see you. I want to say again that the talent still exists in the Over the Hill area. There can be a cultural renaissance. It must be a clean place. It must be a place that respects the heritage that it has. And if you don't believe that the power resides in you, I want you to go to Reuben Cooper. I want you to go to Bethel, and I want you to go across the road to St. Barnabas and speak to them. I want you to go to St. Agnes. I want you to go to any one of those rectors, and you want to look them in their face and say, sir, am I poor? Sir, am I hopeless? Sir, is there something too good for being town? And I guarantee you, any of those men who are not governed by politics will look at you, and he said, and they will say what God said, let the weak say I'm strong. Let the poor say I'm rich. What is this in your hand? Step up, possess the land. This is the people's time. And I give God thanks that we have a leader who loves being town. And he is a man after the heart of his hometown. Mr. Speaker, with that, Pinewood rests. And I want to join Kalani. I want to join Kalani and just simply say this. As he said, it is us. Pinewood also said, we will join the fight with the people that are over the hill. And we won't call you them. You are us. And when you grow, we will take the same pride. Pinewood rests. We support this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Abaco. Yes. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do move that the House suspends until 3 p.m.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.